So this next slide set is talking a little bit about how oil is processed by manufacturers. Now typically when we talk about oils, we mean plant oils. So that would be the oils coming from seeds or fruits like olive oil or canola oil. And the first thing that they do with oil is they refine it. Now, the refinement process removes a lot of different impurities. Some of those would be plant fibers, gums, free fatty acids, waxes, pigments, and it yields a clear, pure, low odor oil, like you see in the bottle from the store. You don't have to remember the names of these processes. Hopefully, you'll watch the video that we've posted from YouTube about the production of canola oil, and it'll show you a little bit of what goes on in the refining process. Some of the processes are called degumming, neutralization, bleaching, deodorization, and winterization. And like I said, you don't need to remember those, but those are the ways that they get these impurities out of the oil. Refinement is really important for a couple of reasons. One thing is that it prevents spoilage. Remember, we talked about how oils will go rancid if they're exposed to oxygen. They'll also go rancid on their own just from fatty acids breaking off of our triglycerides. Remember, we have our triglycerides here, and sometimes your fatty acids will break off of those. And that's often in response to light or heat. And these free fatty acids are less stable than your triglycerides. They tend to go bad faster. And so those will go rancid. So one of the things that they do when they are refining it is they remove these free fatty acids that are already present in the oil, so that most of what you have left is just your triglycerides like this. Another thing that is good about refinement is that it removes other impurities that might burn at a lower temperature than your oil. So the smoke point is the temperature at which a fat or oil first starts to smoke. And so when you heat up your oil in the frying pan on the stove, at some point it's going to start burning up, and that would be called the smoke point. And there are some things that have a lower temperature that they start burning than oil, like your plant fibers that they remove from here. So if they didn't remove these things from your oil, then you wouldn't be able to heat your oil as high before it started to burn up. So that's why it's important to refine your oils, is because it makes it look better, it makes it smell better, and it keeps it from going bad and from burning. So hydrogenation is another thing they might do to your oils. We talked about trans fats in our first video, and remember that a trans fat looks like this guy in the middle. It's your unsaturated fatty acid that's been twisted on itself and turned into a long, flat fatty acid instead of this guy with a bend in the middle. So hydrogenation is the process that turns an unsaturated fatty acid into a trans fatty acid, and from a trans fatty acid into a saturated fatty acid. So if you look at the name, hydrogenation, that should tell you they are adding hydrogen to the molecule. So if you look at this one on top, this is oleic acid, and if you remember, it's missing 2 hydrogen atoms, and that's why it's bending on itself. Well, by the end of the process, it looks like this. It's added 2 more hydrogen atoms so that it's a saturated fatty acid and it's all nice and straight. Well, here in the middle, it hasn't added a hydrogen yet. All it's done is just twisted it. And so that is called partial hydrogenation, and that is no longer allowed by the FDA. If you remember, trans fatty acids are not good for the body. It raises your risk of heart disease, and so they no longer allow partial hydrogenation of oils. But you still see fully hydrogenated oils around, and that just means that they've gone through the whole process, so it's no longer a trans fat, it's just a saturated fatty acid, and it's had those extra hydrogen molecules, or atoms, added to the molecule of the fatty acid. So that's hydrogenation. They'll do this so that they have solid fats. They can produce solid fats from vegetable oils. And having solid fats can be really important for your baking products, but we're going to talk about that in a later video. I just wanted to make sure you know hydrogenation is the process that turns an unsaturated fatty acid into a saturated fatty acid. Another thing that you might see in a oil processing plant is interesterification. Now that's a long word, but it's a pretty simple concept. Basically what they're doing is they're taking the triglycerides, they're pulling off these fatty acids, and they're shuffling them up so that they come up with a different blend of fatty acids on all their triglycerides. Now, why would you do this? Interesterification can take a liquid oil and a solid fat and blend them up so that you have a nice consistent product and you have a solid fat, but then it's cheaper because the solid fat is mixed with this liquid oil, and the vegetable oil is very cheap compared to the solid fats. And so, yeah, interesterification, just think of it as shuffling the fatty acids. Another thing that you'll see in oil processing plants is the addition of antioxidants. Now, this is going back to the concept of rancidity. Remember, fats spoil over time if they're exposed to oxygen, and those rancid fats have off flavors and odors, and they're unhealthy for the body. Well, antioxidants are compounds that keep oxygen from reacting with your fatty acids. And antioxidants usually occur naturally in oils, but while they're removing all those impurities, often these antioxidants are destroyed. So, manufacturers will add antioxidants back into the processed oil once they've refined it so that they won't go rancid as quickly. And that can also be a benefit nutritionally. Antioxidants are good for the body. So the antioxidants that you'll see mostly in oils are BHA and BHT. You don't have to remember that, but do remember that antioxidants are added to prevent oil from going rancid. Another thing that they might do is emulsification. So the concept of emulsification comes from the concept that water and oil do not mix naturally. So sometimes we'll add ingredients that will help water and oil to mix, and this is called emulsification. Emulsification is part of the process of producing margarine. Margarine is mostly fat, but it does have a little bit of water in it too, and they have to add emulsifiers in order for it to form a consistent product that does not separate into water and oil. Emulsifiers will also be added into shortening sometimes, and typically this is so that the shortening blends more easily into a batter or whatever your baked product is. So that's the gist of the processes that you'll see that produce different kinds of oils. In the next slide set, we're going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of oils that you'll use in baking.